Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Dread Time Stories. I'm your host, Dr. Phobia. And tonight, dear patients, it's time for me to administer you another round of real horror stories. Tonight's tales all have to do with people who have experienced losses in time. And actually, the second story comes from my own father and my uncle. So without further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy tonight's tale, Truly Terrifying, Volume 11. So this is by far the strangest/scariest thing that's ever happened to me in my entire life. When I was 13 years old, my parents asked me what I wanted for my birthday. So I told them I wanted to have all of my friends over for a weekend at our house. We had a big house with a large property growing up, so it was kind of a no-brainer on what I wanted to do. My parents were totally okay with it and actually were excited to have me there for my 13th birthday instead of me wanting to go out somewhere else. So after school on Friday, my friends actually showed up for the weekend. All was going well until about 10 o'clock that night when we decided to all play hide and seek. Me, being kind of a dick at that age, and us not really having any rules, I decided to go hide in a little crawl space type area that was connected to the laundry room in our basement. To make it a little more fair, I even left the access panel to the actual crawl space open, so if my friends did stumble in there, they might see the crawl space and come in and find me. So as my buddy Todd counted down, I made my way into the laundry room, pulled the 3x3 square off the wall, and climbed inside. I remember sitting there just kind of entertaining myself, just looking at the underbelly of the house, when I started to realize that maybe I'd been down there for a while. Maybe I needed to come out. At least one of my friends would probably be found so I wouldn't have to be it, right? So I made my way over to the access panel, climbed out into the laundry room, and then from the laundry room into the main section of the basement. I was shocked at what I saw. Light was streaming in from every window in the basement. Broad daylight. It was 10 o'clock at night when I had gone in there, so I was definitely confused. The next thing I noticed that all my friends' sleeping bags that were scattered across the floor were gone. So I made my way across the basement to the stairs and climbed them. I opened the door into the kitchen and I saw my mother sitting there. She looked like she hadn't slept, and I heard my father in the other room on the phone with someone. My mother looked up sleepily from her coffee and screamed with happiness and ran over to me and threw her arms around me. She started crying and telling me that she loved me and that everything was going to be okay. My father then came into the room, put his phone down, and joined us for the group hug. A few minutes later, a couple of police officers showed up at the house. They started asking me where I had been, and I told them in the crawl space in the basement. All of them, my parents and the two police officers, looked at me like I had grown a second head out of my neck. They told me they had searched the entire house, top to bottom, including the crawl space, and I was not there. I looked even more confused and asked them how long I had been gone. My mother then showed me her phone. It was Sunday morning at 8:55 a.m. I had been missing for almost 2 days. To say I was shocked was literally the understatement of the century. It took me at least an hour to even form words to describe what had happened. And when I was asked over and over again, I told them I didn't really know. I just said I was down there in the crawl space just looking at everything, and the next thing I know, I felt that time had passed, but I didn't know how much. The next day at school, my friends all asked me exactly what happened, and just like my parents and those police officers, they didn't believe me either. So needless to say, I lived in that house for another 3 years after that, and I never set foot in that laundry room, even though it pissed off my mother that she still had to do my laundry, but I flat out refused to go in there. And honestly, I don't know what anomalies are going on in that house, but I just hope the next family that moved in after us didn't have to find out like I did. So before I was born, my dad and my uncle were pretty much inseparable. They had kind of grown apart in their early years, but had slowly come back to building a relationship later on in life. They loved fishing, and they went all the time. And on one particular fishing trip right before I was born, my dad and my uncle were actually wading out into the water, down at a pretty popular spot down at the river. They were both standing on one of the sandbars when, to my dad's horror, the sandbar actually started to erode. And same thing with my uncle. Both of them were losing their footing and getting swept downstream. So, my dad looked at my uncle, and they nodded, and they both laid on their back and kicked their feet straight up like they were taught to do, just to float. My dad said they floated maybe 10 feet away from the sandbar when suddenly everything went white. The next thing they knew, they were standing on another sandbar a quarter of a mile downstream with no idea how they had gotten there. All of their gear was still in their packs. Their poles were in their hands. My uncle was still even holding on to his beer. They still to this day cannot explain what happened. My dad describes it like literally the hand of God just picked them both up and put them on that sandbar. So whether it was divine intervention, aliens, or some other anomaly, I'm just glad that both my Uncle Bob and my dad are okay. And before you ask, they still share a love for fishing. Well, dear patients, that was another episode of Truly Terrifying. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for listening. Like I always say in closing, check under your bed, look in your closet, and sleep with the light on. The life you save may very well be your own. Good night, everyone.